Hello, welcome to Tech Now Day. I am Hamida Rebai. I will present today's session about ASP.NET Core and Azure Devops. Who I am Microsoft MVP in Developer Technologies, a software architect, a member and speaker in .NET Foundation. I am also MCT and Azure certified. You can follow me on Medium blog, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. If you have any questions after the session, don't forget to use hashtag Women in Tech on all social media. You can reach me by email or Twitter or LinkedIn. We will start by deploying an application from GitHub to Azure App Service. After, we will focus on continuous integration and deployment. Next, we will present Azure Devops project in Azure to create a CI/CD pipeline. And finally, we will present some tools in Azure that we can use it in monitoring and debugging. The Azure DevOps project simplifies the setup of an entire continuous integration CI and continuous delivery CD pipeline to Azure with Azure DevOps. Continuous integration and continuous delivery CI/CD is backbone of DevOps. It helps fast software development and deploying to enable continuous delivery of value to end user by achieving incremental software delivery. Continuous integration is an automated way to build, package, and test the applications. These builds are passed as input to the CD pipeline. Continuous delivery automates the delivery of applications to selected infrastructure environment like deploy, development, production. With Azure DevOps, you deploy any software on any platform. You can start with existing code or use one of the provided sample applications. Then you can quickly deploy that application to various Azure services such as virtual machines, app service, Azure Kubernetes services, Azure SQL database, and Azure Service Fabric. DevOps project does all the work for the initial configuration of a DevOps pipeline, including everything from setting up the initial Git repository, configuring the CI/CD pipeline, creating an application inside research for monitoring, and providing a single view of the entire solution with the creation of a DevOps project dashboard in the Azure portal. To deploy an application to Azure App Service, we need to start building a simple app in GitHub. We will create Azure App Service app using Azure Portal. Azure App Service is an Azure's web hosting platform. Deploying a web app to Azure App Service can be done manually or by an automated process. We will discuss deployment methods and that can be triggered manually or by script using the command line or triggered manually using Visual Studio. We will add staging slots using two different ways by command line or Azure Portal. Deploying slots support the staging of changes without impacting the app running in production. On the staged version of the app is validated by a quality assurance team. The production staging slots can be swapped. The app in staging is promoted to production in this manner. The following step creates a staging slot, deploy some changes to it, and swap the staging slot with production after verification. And finally, we will deploy an update to the staging slots. The following subscriptions are required. We need an account on Azure. If you don't have, you can get a free trial. Azure Devops Services, it's free. GitHub, if you don't have an account, you can sign up for free. And the following tools are required. A fundamental understanding of Git is recommended for this demo. We can review the Git documentation. .NET Core SDK, the version 5 or later, is required to build around a simple app. A Visual Studio is installed with .NET Core cross-platform deployment workload. The .NET Core SDK is already installed. To verify your .NET Core SDK installation, we open command shell and run following command .NET version, and we have 9 version. This is an overview about Azure DevOps. We have Azure Board, the first one, the option to do your CI build for any platform and any tool or language. So we have the Azure Pipelines, provide the web interface where you can create jobs that contain steps that need to take place in order to create a production artifact for your software. Azure Devops also provides the ability to manage artifacts that we often know better as packages. Think about node page, NuGet page, etc. With the artifact management part of Azure DevOps, we can support shift left in security by tracking which packages are used in your software development process. We can also see here Azure Test Plan. With Azure Test Plan, Microsoft provides a way for you to fully integrate the testing into your Azure process. You can use a test plan you might already have and stick them into the same toolset. You can track requirements on tests and you can get insight in the functional coverage you have on your Azure stories in the test suites you have defined. We will use today GitHub, that is a code hosting platform for version control and collaboration. It lets you and others work together on projects from anywhere. We will clone our simple app from GitHub using Visual Studio. I'm going to show you how we can create a GitHub repo in Azure DevOps and fill it with some source code. So when we go back to our repo tab in Azure DevOps, you can then see that we have in the first an empty Git repository. Now we will start our demo. So we will build a sample app from GitHub. I will use a video here to be able to do many tests and many demos. So the first one, we will do a demo to build. So we will try to clone this project. You can find it in my account GitHub, that mentioned in the top of the video, and you click on fork to get your own copy. And you are able to make any update to this project. It's an ASP.NET Core .NET 5 application, the version 5. Now we'll open Visual Studio to be able to clone a repository. Here we get the code from our repository that we already copied, and we will add the path. You add the name that you want here, and we click on clone. When we click on clone, we will have our project already loaded here. As you can see, we have controller, modder. It's an MVC application. It's a blog that can help us to show our blog with an image. We click on IS Express to see our blog. As you can see here we have 4 blogs mentioned with pictures. It's like a card. We use Bootstrap here to display these cards. Now we go back to we will open Azure DevOps here. I already logged to Azure DevOps and we will create a new project here. I will show you how we can create a new project. It's a public, it can be private. So, but it will be public for me. And when we click on Advanced, here we can find Git or TFS, the old version, and we can use a Scrum, for example, Scrum methodology. After we click on Create, it takes a few seconds to be able to get our all component here. As you can see, we have the board, the repo, and when we click on repo, we have an empty Git repo. We can click on clone in Visual Studio and Visual Code if you use Visual Code. As you can see here, I have the project, I have everything configured to be deployed to Git repo. And for my case, I will use Visual Studio. We can generate Git credential if you want to add more security to your repo and to be used for specific users. For me, I will change it to Visual Studio because I'm using Visual Studio. If you click on Open here, we will get just an empty project. So we need to add our project in this repo. As you can see, he requests us if you want to clone it locally in our machine to be able to add after our project and use command line of Git to pull or push or add files or commit our files. So, but in our case, we have already our project, so we click in Import Repository. I will copy the previous link here. You copy your link that you use to fork this application, this source code, and we add the link here and clone URL. You give a name. I will keep this name. We can add requires authentication if you want to add more security. It's better to secure your Git repo if you are working with a team and we use it for production purpose. So here it takes few seconds. As you can see, it's really faster, and we have our source code. This is the same code that we have MVC, our MVC project here, as you can see. Now, we will create Azure App Service app using Azure Portal. So it's important to see how we can create an Azure app. So we will go to the portal of Azure. You need to log in to the portal here. As you can see, portal azure.com. We click on create new. Here we have web app. We select research group, or we can create a new research group if you want to have, if you have many research to add it to this research group. So I have already a research group that I selected here. I give a name, a demo, this one, and I will click choose code. You can choose Docker container if you want to use containers. We choose here .NET 5 because it's a .NET 5 application. And I will click on create. The first step is to verification if we didn't missing anything. After we click on create, if all required inputs are added. After we click go to research to see if our app service is already created. We have a default URL, but you can personalize your DNS if you have already a DNS. You can link this URL to a real DNS. Now we will deploy our application using Visual Studio to Azure. So I will come back to my application. I will generate a release. I need to build our application in release mode, not in debug mode, to be able to have only needed files. And we click on publish. Now, as you can see, we have many options. We can publish your application, Azure, as a Docker container registry. You can use folder to your application. You can use FTP, IIS in VM, or you can only import your profile to deploy it to any provider. We click on Azure, next. We can choose app service on Windows or as a container or Azure Container Registry or just Azure Virtual Machine. I will choose Windows mode And here we need to fill your subscription, your view. If you have one of more, you need to select the convenient one. Here we have our link that we already generated. So as you can see, we have the link, so we choose it and we click on. Here, as you can see, if you have any service dependency, you can add it here. You can configure your continuous delivery from here. If you want to add your repo and your GitHub link. So we can use Visual Studio to create your web app, to configure your continuous delivery, to add service dependency. So all options are already exist in, and as you can see here, we have our application already deployed. Now we will deployment slot. We will use the deployment slot to deploy in many changes. If you have any many changes here, in many slots, but we will be related to the same Azure App Service. But we will have many slots for production, for staging, for deployment, for development. We will configure first. Here, we will go to application here, and we will go to deployment slot. We will use, as you can see here, deployment slot. In the deployment option, we have only production. We are deploying in production that's already running. The traffic is full. Now, we will use a command line here. We will use shell, Cloud Shell, to be able to add a new deployment slot. And we copy this command line. AZ web app deployment slot create. We give a name, we identify the resource group, and we give a name to the slot. That's in our case stagings. As you can see here, we have a lot of options. It's a JSON result that identify our slots. I go back here to my deployment slot. I refresh to be able to see the new slot that already created using Cloud Shell. We can share the traffic between them. Here, it's a simple way using the interface of Portal Azure to create the slot too. You can clone from existing slot or just do not clone settings. Better to use this option. And we click to add, and you will have another slot, as you can see here, added. So we are able to deploy to one or more than a slot. I will go back here to Visual Studio to deploy to another slot here. Here, if we go back to our resource group that we already created, we will find the staging, and the production is the first one that we used to deploy our application. I will try to make some changes to see the difference between the slots here. I will try to copy a block here from a card here to say I have another article or another block to add to our website. So I made some changes here, as you can see, and we will deploy, create a new deployments, and we will deploy to Azure App Service. We choose dev test, for example, click on finish, and I will publish here, and we will see the changes between the production and the dev test slots. Here we have the 5 blocks. and we have the link here. If we click here, we will find a new URL for our slots. So in App Service, we have for every slot a URL, a specific URL that we can use it to see the difference between the production and the others. Now we will create the CI/CD pipeline in Azure Devops. To do that, we need to go back now to Azure Devops, and I will start. This is the project. I will click on pipelines. Here, as you can see, we have environment. We can create one or more environment. It can be your slots too. So you can create a slot by environment. For example, here I create an environment, or you can just configure this pipeline without adding your environments. It depends from your needs. We click on create pipelines. We choose GitHub here. We can choose GitHub to be able to use Git as CI/CD pipelines here. We have many repo to choose, so I selected this one, and we click to approve and install. We need to identify here to be able to give an access to between GitHub and Azure Devops. Now we are configuring our pipeline. We need to choose the convenient framework. In our case, it's an ASP.NET Core .NET framework. And here we need to save, to click on Save and Run to set up our CI with Azure Pipeline. So we create our pipeline, we do the commits, and we will check the job here. It takes few seconds. It depends from your project and from your unit test that you will use it. So as you can see, he launched new cat, installer, command, vs build, vs test. So he built your application. After, he will launch your unit test to ensure the right coverage of your code. As you can see, it's here, it's green, so no problems. Now we will go to do the CD now. So we use release, new pipeline, and we select, in our case, we can select only Azure App Service deployment, but we have used the deployment slot, so we need to configure our deployment with the slots. So we give a name to the stage here. Okay, and now we click on job tasks here. And we need to fill all information requested, like Azure subscription, your app service name, all what you need here. So you need to confirm your authentication. And we have here your app service name, your slots to choose your slot 2. It's production, it's the dev test, what you need. For example, dev test, I will use this one. And we click on release, and here we will click on deploy to be able to deploy our source code that is in our Git repository to app services using CI/CD deployments. You can see the queue, you can see here it takes maybe a few seconds, sometimes some minutes to be able to deploy our projects. Now, this is a manually method that we use it here, but we can use Azure DevOps project that is inside Azure to be able to deploy, to create our CI/CD pipeline. To do that, we will open our Azure portal. We click on Create a Research. We choose DevOps Starter here. We click on Create. Here we can choose .NET, Node.js. We have many platforms that you can use. Here we can select Azure DevOps, GitHub. So we have many options here supported. And here we need to identify a framework, so we can use ASP.NET Core. And here we have Kubernetes, containers, app service. We click to authorize to be able here to authorize our source code that is located in GitHub, and we click on review. We need to add a repository, give a name to repository, give a name to web app, and we choose also location, convenient location. We click on review, create, and we have here deployment in progress. We go to the research, and we can click on authorize to be able to see all different steps of CI/CD deployment of our application. So the build, the release will be configured automatically using this template of Azure DevOps Starter. As you can see here in GitHub, we can see the build, deployment, and functional test if you have a unit test inside your application. As you can see here in GitHub, we used GitHub to do the CI/CD in our case. Now, we will choose our application, existing application here. As you can see here, it deployed a website, the default website to create Azure ASP.NET Core. Now we will choose here Azure Devops. We have already our application, Azure Devops, our repo. Bring your code. So we need to identify our code, not create a new code. And we choose code repository GitHub. In our case, for example, we have the repository, the branch. We select the runtime, .NET, ASP.NET Core. We click on services, Windows here, and we needed to add a name to the project that will be created after in Azure DevOps as a new project. This template, it's really easy to use if you are new to configure CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps. You can see different methods to deploy .NET, Java, PHP, Node.js. So we click on create here. It takes few seconds to have the deployment process finished and to see it after in Azure DevOps. We have here the code, the link for build, as you can see here. So this template of Azure Starter can be used for Azure DevOps or with GitHub, as we have seen in the first demo. So here we have the build step, the release, you have your code, it's in GitHub always, and we have the restart part, the build, running your unit test, publishing your application to Azure App Service. Because we selected Azure App Service, but we can deploy it to Azure Kubernetes Service, container, or external in any external link. As you can see here, we will check the dev process release here. We have the page that show you how we can use it. And we have here the deployment in process. Start by running on agents. And in the end, we will have our application all is running here. And we will choose this link to see the application. For monitor and debug is used to monitor your application. We have many tools that we can use it to monitor and debug our application if you have any problems. So to do that, we will select here monitoring in Azure. We create a new rule to be able to add many rules here. You can edit your research here. You can add many conditions. So here, if you have any problems related to the memory, average response time, CPU time, so you have many options to add to be able to not have any problem with your application. After we can use the metric here to see the average memory working, as you can see here. We can choose any options, CPU time. You are able to see your codes after here, which research group, which you can change the chart to as agreed, any chart. So you are able to see which research group is consuming many research. Here we have the log analytics that we can activate it to have more and more logs. We can add logs, DLL of the logs to your application to be able to have more options. Here we have the health check. You can enable it. You need to identify a path here. You can configure load balancing too. You have diagnostic settings. It's in preview mode. You can have more options. Here we have diagnosis settings are used to configure streaming export. So we can select app service HTTP logs. It depends from your application, or that can be multiple microservices running in many app services or in many containers or in your app service 2 only. We have here app service logs that you can add to your application, your web service, if you have any errors. And log stream here. We can see log stream. I didn't configure the log stream, but you can do it with your application. It's on a configuration file. And you have the processes explorer too. So we have many options to do the monitoring to your application, and you can use Azure Monitor or Application Insight too. Not only the monitoring part of your application. Here we have the many Scotch submits. So we have the application inside that we can enable it in our application. You can add the DLL to your application to have more information about your application. If you have any questions about Azure Apps, Azure Devops, you can use these links to learn more about that. We have you can start a new course here in side. You have to learn Microsoft Learn, use Microsoft Learn. We can find many research here that you can use it. And if you have any questions, you can reach me by email or by Twitter, by my blog, by LinkedIn or YouTube. Thank you.